So some of the things that are going to be a challenge for families, and if you are a family member listening now, just the different group of professionals that you're going to be working with. You're going to be moving away from early intervention providers. There may be some overlap as far as related service providers, but there is going to be a new group of professionals. Information overload, just IDEA, special education law. There's lots of lingo that's going to come into play. You certainly don't have to become an expert on all of it, but becoming familiar with a whole new set of information can be overwhelming, but it can also be empowering in terms of advocating for your child. And then just the uncertainty of it all. Families are often unsure about what to expect moving from early intervention to preschool services. So we're going to talk through quickly the transition timeline. So the transition period starts before your child's 3rd birthday. Your early intervention provider should begin to help you through this transition period, meeting with your local school district reps to discuss your child and then to talk about the services that the school district provides. The second step is once the transition process has begun. This is when families accessing any literature online, attending workshops, definitely talking to other parents can be a nice way to educate yourself about special education laws, different types of preschool programs and services, IEPs, the individualized education programs. So again, it can be a little overwhelming, but there are a lot of great resources. Hands and Voices obviously has some nice resources for families to access. The next step of the timeline is your child's initial evaluation. So this evaluation should be multi-factored. We're looking at sort of all of the important developmental areas for your child, and this is going to help determine if your child is indeed eligible for an IEP. This can be a little different for kids with hearing loss because it's usually a little more straightforward as far as eligibility goes. But once this evaluation is completed, your team should meet to review the results. This is a time to ask lots of questions. So we're talking about different assessment tools and outcomes from those assessment tools. This is a time to sort of gather all the information that we can to see where your child is as far as language, communication, pre-academics, and social skills. And if your child is going to receive IEP services, this is when the team will also meet again to write the IEP. Step 4 comes down to sort of taking a look at the placement options that would be available to your child. And this, again, is based on, we want to think about those assessment results and think about what your child needs as far as, and primarily for most kids who are deaf or hard of hearing, it's language and communication. But the social piece is obviously very important, and those pre-academic skills. There is a resource on the the Hands and Voices website that is a checklist for when you visit preschool programs, which I think is really nice. I don't think it's too overwhelming, but it's nice to bring along with you when you are visiting preschool programs, because it's kind of hard to tell sometimes kind of what you're looking at. So arranging a visit to various preschool options is a nice way to familiarize yourself with what's available. And you can always ask someone to come along with you. Your early intervention provider, even just a friend or a family member can be helpful. Someone to come along, an extra pair of eyes can be helpful. Step 5, it's time to put together the IEP. Your child's individualized education program will lay out what goals and services, and in the end, what school placement is appropriate. And then step 6 is, moving on into the preschool services. So this whole transition period seems like there are a lot of steps, and there kind of are, and it's in a pretty condensed timeline. So making sure that you are working closely with your early intervention providers is very important. So we're going to talk a little bit about when you're looking at preschool programs, what kinds of characteristics are we looking for? So in terms of overall program, we want it to be state licensed. It should have appropriate accreditation, and some of this seems pretty sort of common sense, but these are things to think of when you are thinking about or visiting preschool programs. Maintaining mandated staff to children ratios is very important. Do they accommodate students with other disabilities? And are they connected to other state and national resources? I think that last one is definitely a biggie. So hopefully preschool programs and those professionals are familiar and connected to other resources available in the state and nationally. Teachers and staff, so some things that you should consider is, do they have sort of general child development knowledge as far as language and social emotional, pre-academic, all of those domains are very important. So we want to make sure the teachers and the staff at the preschool program are properly trained. Are they committed to regular ongoing professional development? And this third check mark here obviously is specific to kids who are deaf or hard of hearing, but are they knowledgeable about spoken and or sign language development? Do they have an understanding of the social emotional needs of young children with hearing loss? And then another important piece, if your child is using any sort of amplification, the staff and teachers should be willing to assign someone to check that child's device on a daily basis. The technology is fantastic, but it needs to be in working order, obviously, for it to be beneficial. So looking at the learning environment, does the program have age-appropriate books and toys and other materials? Something that may be of interest to families is, are there language models for the child who is deaf or hard of hearing? This goes for across the spectrum of communication modes, but I would say in particular for kids who are using sign language, this may be in particular pretty important to see. Are there peers, are there other teachers who they can communicate with? Is the learning environment appropriately lit? Clearly, kids with hearing loss are most of the time relying on a lot of visual information. So sort of just the visual and acoustic environment both are important for those kids. And there's some tools and checklists out there. Again, I would check out Hanson Voice's website to see that can kind of take you through a little more in depth as far as like creating an appropriate visual and acoustic environment. All right, something that is also important, a characteristic of a quality preschool, families should feel welcome to visit anytime. If any of you have had a child in daycare or part of any child care program, it's sort of very similar. Staff and teachers should make families feel welcome. Families should be expected and encouraged to be involved. And then ongoing communication with teachers and staff is very important. So again, some of these seem, I would say, pretty common sense, but these are things to, really look and ask questions when you visit a program and ask for examples of, how communication, what that looks like between staff and families, and if it's okay, if you should be able to come in and visit your child and feel welcome. So those are some important characteristics. All right, so moving on, we're going to talk a little bit about placement options. So, and this is also on the handout. So there are a variety of placement options. Just the word, if you're a family member or family or a parent, placement in general can kind of get the hackles up on the part of professionals, but we need to talk about the continuum of placement options, one of which is general education placement. So this would be sort of a regular education classroom where your child may have itinerant services from a teacher of the deaf, interpreters, assistive listening technology. So there would still be supports in that placement, but it's a regular education classroom. Excuse me. The next is special day classes and resource programs. So these are programs that are required to be provided, and some of them may include sort of a reverse mainstreaming model where students are served in, deaf or hard of hearing students served together in a resource room or program, special class, and then attend particular classes with typically hearing students. Partial mainstreaming may be an option, and then there could be team teaching options where the teacher of the deaf and the either a special education teacher or regular education teacher team teach. So that's another option. Regional programs, I will say here in Ohio, there are, as time goes on, less and less regional programs like this, but there are some that this is one option of a program that brings together sort of a group, a critical mass of students that are of similar age and language usage for, opportunities for direct instruction and communication with staff and peers. So that is one option. Another option is a state school for the deaf. I know that there is I would say, a pretty wide, maybe a misconception about what state schools for the deaf look like and what kind of services provided. Many, including here in Ohio, do offer residential services, but it is by no means required. And in particular for preschoolers, they're not housing preschoolers in a residential program anyway. But state schools for the deaf, typically state funded and available statewide. For schools, districts are responsible for paying for transportation, but other than that, these types of services are usually free of charge. They're funded through the state. The last option is non-public schools, parochial private schools, virtual schools, home instruction. These are, I would say, a relatively few students with special needs access these programs just because they are not tied to any funding as far as in requirements for providing special services. So, but families obviously have that option of non-public preschool programs. So we're going to move on to talking about how to be an active participant in your child's IEP team. So the IEP team it's required to have a general education teacher. Here in Ohio, there is no requirement to have a trained specialized teacher of the deaf on the team, but it is very helpful and nice to have somebody who is familiar with the unique needs of deaf and hard of hearing children. But as a parent, there are several things that you can do to play an active part of this team. One is to be a planner. So developing sort of a bigger vision for your child's future is one way to go about doing this. You know, what are you looking, when you see into the future, what do you see your child? Where do you see them? How do you see them communicating and interacting with people who are deaf or hard of hearing, folks who are hearing? What's your vision? Considering short-term goals. Another part of being a planner is making a list of topics and concerns. So just showing up at the IEP meeting sort of on the spot, coming up with, you know, trying to remember the concerns, the things that you wanted to say can be a little challenging. So making a list before you go is really helpful. I would say, if it were me, I would almost always bring someone, if it were possible, someone else with you to the meeting. Somebody to take notes, and this could be grandma, this could be a spouse, it could be a friend, it could be, you know, somebody from Ohio Hands and Voices, someone to accompany you to that meeting, to help you take notes, to think, kind of keep your thoughts on track. Obviously, things can get emotional when you're talking about your own child, so it's just nice to have another person there with you. Visualizing the meeting in your head. A nice way is just to sort of think about how you want this meeting to go. I mean, you're going to have likely an ongoing relationship with this school district, so kind of coming up with how you want this meeting to go in your head. And then thinking about how the team might respond to your requests, and if you suspect they may say no to some of your requests, think about how you would reply, and if there's an alternative option or idea that you could present. So instead of just shutting the whole thing down, thinking through what are some other ways you can reach your goals without in an alternative fashion. Being an organizer, there are going to be a lot of documents and a lot of papers and records, your child's medical history and assessments and evaluation. Things that are related to your child's educational progress are going to be important for you to keep on hand. I, as a professional, don't have experience with this because I don't have a child who is deaf or hard of hearing, but I would highly suggest, if you're a family, to talk to other family members about how they keep and organize their documents. And then keep notes of your thoughts and concerns. So just writing things down. Obviously, you can use, there's lots of cool apps and technological ways of going about this, but even just paper, pencil, jotting things down to sort of keep your thoughts and concerns at the forefront, so you don't show up to the meeting and then you kind of forget all of those things that you really wanted to say. Being a thinker, so taking the time during early intervention to educate yourself about your child's transition. So you're going to want to learn, oh, I can see on the slide there's some information cut off, but learning about you know, what's expected in the sort of the general education population. Just asking questions, lots of questions about what school districts provide, what services they provide, reading books, attending workshops. Ohio Hands and Voices obviously offers workshops, but there are a lot of other avenues as far as learning more about IDEA and your rights as a parent. And I think an important piece of this is you don't have to become an expert. You don't have to become a lawyer, a legal expert. You're a parent first and foremost. So be proactive in looking for and, you know, seeking out information, but by and large, you're not expected to become an expert. Rely on those professionals. But educating yourself is an important piece of the puzzle. And then be a talker. Clearly, not everybody is, you know, loud and it sort of naturally is a talker, but asking questions, this is where, you know, bringing somebody else with you to an IEP meeting can be helpful. But ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Share your thoughts. Make your voice heard during these meetings. having attended many IEP meetings, even as a professional, there's usually a lot of folks around the table, and it's a little nerve-wracking, I think, for everybody, and in particular for a parent. So sort of just realizing that you have a place, an important place at the table is a good thing. And then being a partner, so respecting the roles and opinions of the folks on your IEP team. They may interact with your child in very different situations, so obviously you're seeing your child, the most at home, and then, an SLP or a classroom teacher is seeing your child in a different environment. So once you're there in that preschool program, just sort of taking to heart the things that the other professionals have to say. And then the last thing is taking an active role in developing your child's draft IEP. So there's no reason that you should arrive at a meeting and the draft is already complete and it's sort of presented to you sort of as is. So as a family member or a parent, you have a right to be active as far as developing that draft IEP. We're going to end it on talking through a couple of resources. So Ohio Hands and Voices has what is called the Bridge to Preschool, Navigating a Successful Transition. This is something you can find on our website, as well as the Ohio Communication Plan. These are two resources that were adapted from other states' documents. So Colorado Hands and Voices had this Bridge to Preschool document, and we here in Ohio adapted it for this state. The communication plan is something that can be used for students across the spectrum as far as communication and language goes. That can be helpful, something that you can bring to your IEP meeting. And then the Hands and Voices, the national headquarters website, also has an IEP 504 checklist. We didn't go into 504 plans today, but this checklist can be helpful in ensuring that your IEP team is kind of going through all the important pieces and parts for your child as an individual. And then I mentioned this earlier, the preschool evaluation chart. So when you're visiting preschools, this is a nice chart to bring with you that can kind of guide you through what you're observing and questions you should be asking. I would highly recommend that resource as well. So we are going to end it there. Again, I apologize for the technical difficulties in the beginning. You will get an evaluation form via email, and we look forward to your feedback, and we hope you can join us for future webinars. Thanks. Bye.